All right, let's talk about that one statistical tool, that one number that can finally help settle a classic family argument. Yep, today we're diving into the world of the index number.
I mean, you've totally heard this before, right? From your parents, your grandparents, that classic line, back in my day, everything was so much more affordable. It's this universal feeling that you hear no matter where you are in the world.
So the big question is it just nostalgia talking, people remembering the good old days, or has the cost of living actually gone through the roof? Well, to figure that out, we can't just rely on feelings. We need something solid. We need a precise tool. And that, my friends, is exactly where the index number comes in. Okay, so let's make this official. It's time to take that vague feeling of, gosh, things are so expensive now, and turn it into a real, hard number we can actually measure and compare. So what is an index number, really? Well, at its heart, it's just a standardized way to compare the same thing at two different moments in time. Think of it like a yardstick for change. It's basically a ratio that boils it all down into a simple, easy-to-understand percentage.
Now, to make this work, you always need two key pieces. First, you've got your base year, what we call P0. This is your starting line, your reference point, your back in my day. Then, you've got the current year, or P1. And that's today, the point we're comparing everything to.
And you know what? The basic formula is surprisingly simple. Seriously, you just take the price from the current year, divide it by the price from the base year, and then multiply the whole thing by 100. So let's say a loaf of bread went from like 2 rupees to 20 rupees. You just do 20 divided by 2, which is 10. Then multiply by 100. Boom, your index number is 1,000. That just means the price is 10 times what it used to be. Easy, right?
Okay, so tracking one item is simple. But let's be real, our lives are way more complicated than just the price of bread, right? We buy tons of different things, and we need a way to track how all of those prices are changing together.
Yeah, tracking one thing is easy, but it definitely doesn't paint the whole picture. To get a real sense of the impact on our wallets, we have to look at a whole collection of goods and services, and this is what economists have a great name for. They call it a shopping basket.
So the first and most straightforward way to do this is with something called a simple aggregative index. I know, the name sounds super technical, but the idea is actually really simple. You literally just add up the prices of everything in your basket for this year, and then you divide that total by what the same basket would have cost back in the base year. And that fancy little symbol you see there, the sigma, that's just math shorthand for add it all up. But there's a problem. This simple method has a pretty big flaw. And to understand it, we have to realize a fundamental truth. Not all the stuff we buy is equally important. This is where things start to get really clever. Think about it this way. Is a 10% price hike on your monthly rent the same as a 10% hike on a movie ticket? No way. A jump in your rent hits your budget way harder than a small increase on something you might buy once in a while. But that simple method we just talked about, it treats them both as if they're equally important, and that's just not how life works.
So how do we fix this?
Well, we have to bring quantity into the equation. We need to give more importance or more weight to the things we spend more of our money on. And this key step is what takes us from a kind of clumsy, simple index to a much, much more accurate tool, the weighted index.
And this is where the story gets really interesting. Because once all the experts agreed that yes, weighting is crucial, they immediately started to disagree on the best way to actually do it. This sparked what you could call the Great Basket Debate, leading to two very famous and very different approaches. Okay, this is brilliant because it gets right to the heart of the problem. In one corner, you have a guy named Laspeyres. He said we should use the quantities from the base year, our old shopping habits. His method is basically asking, if I bought the exact same stuff I bought back in 2002, how much would that cost me today? But then in the other corner, you have Paasche, and he's like, hold on, our habits change. He argued we should use the quantities from the current year, our new shopping habits. So his question is more like, how much does my lifestyle today cost compared to what this same lifestyle would have cost me back in 2002? See the difference? It's all about which shopping basket you think is more important, the old one or the new one. So who won the debate? Well, funny enough, other statisticians came along and basically said, hey, why not just use both? And that's exactly what they did. People like Fisher and Dervish Bowley came up with these really clever compromises. They calculate the index both ways, once with the old basket, once with the new one, and then just find the average of the two. It creates a really nice balanced middle ground. Okay, so after all this math about base years and weighted baskets, you might be wondering, what's the payoff?
why does any of this actually matter to you and me? Well, let me tell you, it matters a lot. The truth is, you see these index numbers all the time, even if you don't recognize them by name. You know when you hear about the Consumer Price Index, the CPI on the news, the number that tells us about inflation? Yep, that's a weighted index. Or when they say the stock market is up or down, they're talking about indices like the S&P 500. These numbers aren't just for economists. They influence huge government policies, major business decisions, and yeah, they have a direct impact on your wallet.
And that brings us to the big final idea here. Index numbers are without a doubt incredibly powerful tools, but they always rely on a snapshot in time, a fixed basket of goods. In a world like ours, where our tastes, our technology, our whole way of life is changing so fast, it leaves us with a really fascinating question to chew on. Can any single number, no matter how cleverly it's calculated, ever truly capture something as complex, as dynamic, and as personal as the real cost of living? Something to think about.